So it's been a few days now since the Cult of the Wolf / Frost Caves update went live. How are you guys getting on taking on the Cultists and the Ulv? I found that the caves can be pretty tough as a solo player if you don't have the right gear. So I'm going to actually show you some of the weaknesses and some tips about how to defeat some of these guys. This is just a showcase. I'm going to spawn a bunch of these cultists back at my friendly base in my meadows, just show you the different types of damage and what maybe works a bit better. So the best in VALHEIM news and guides, let's go. So one of the most effective weapons to use against them is the Draugr bow. They're actually taking a huge amount of damage from poison. And as you would expect from a creature that's kind of half man, half wolf, silver is also its enemy. I'm using a combination here of ice arrows or frost arrows and Draugr here. Obviously the poison damage is doing good, and if you've got poison arrows, then that cumulative effect is really going to rinse through them. Here I'm using silver arrows, and you'll definitely see a big difference in the amount of damage it's doing as well. You can see the small damage markers racking up still much more than when I was using just the frost arrows with Draugr. So Draugr and silver arrows, or Draugr and poison arrows, are going to rinse through these guys. And that obviously applies to silver weapons as well. The silver knife wouldn't be a bad shout, especially if you can sneak up on them, although they are very hard to do that with. They've got pretty good hearing, so they will hear you sneaking up on them most times, so it can be pretty tough. Their flame attacks do 50 damage, so as long as you've got some barley wine, or possibly you have managed to get hold of the Fenris armour, which obviously gives you a fire defense buff as well, then hopefully it won't be so bad. But yeah, it's quick and easy to get wrecked by these. That fire damage lasts for 5 seconds as well, and even when they go and swipe you with their melee attack, it still has fire damage attached to it, which does 75 damage. Now you can parry it, but the window for parrying is a little bit shorter than you would expect. So silver's obviously good. Here I'm just showing you how I did it with a knife. One little swipe, it was obviously doing the burning damage, took him down probably to about, I would say 20% maybe, and then 2 special attacks or sneak attacks, and you can see it was over. Compare that to something with like the abysmal blade and stuff, and yeah, it took significantly much more free hits before I could actually finish him off, and then a swipe. Because of the actual fire damage, I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to parry too much though with this guy. You'd have to really be careful. I would say dodge and having a good blade and being swift is probably better. Although again, that's pretty hard to do when you're in a tight corridor. Usually they won't go through doorways inside the actual caves where they live, so that's another little top tip you can maybe keep, is do a few hits. If they manage to get the better of you, then obviously you can just run out and re-heal and then come back in. Another one I particularly like is Frostner, because it does make them go back a little bit, and if you get the stun absolutely right or parry, you can really make short work of them. It's the extra spirit damage that is doing more damage against the cultists especially. I did try a bunch of other hammers to see whether or not it took more damage or it was easier or quicker to stun, but they worked with kind of mixed results. In fact, I'll say it now, it worked pretty poorly. It took a good few swipes and hits, so you would need absolutely huge amounts of stamina to really make this work, and it just wasn't doing enough damage for the output that I was given. If silver or any weapons with spirit damage or poison are still a bit tough to get hold of, then an Atgar is actually pretty decent as well. Obviously it's not the best weapon, but I'm just saying if you don't have a lot of the other stuff, then that might be your best bet to go in there. To keep him at range, and if you get the third hit in, you will finish him off, usually with 2 cycles of attack. The secondary attack works really well. Now obviously you're going to be in a corridor, so you might not be doing as much damage usually when you fight against these guys, but you should still be able to swing it. It's not going to stop you hitting it, and you can see you really do a good amount of stun damage on the cultist, so that's going to just whittle him away. As long as you've got enough stamina, it should work okay. And that's about it really for the cultists. Just aim to have silver on you, either use silver tools or weapons, some knives or swords. Can't do that, maybe arrows. I understand that silver's a bit of a rarer commodity, you don't necessarily want to be utilising it too much, so you could flip to Draugr's Fang, or just make sure you got plenty of poison arrows on you. Spears and axes aren't going to be your friend unless you've got maybe the crystal axe. You're just too slow to swing them, so it'll be hitting you with that melee damage and the fire damage, and yeah, I just definitely wouldn't recommend it. And spears, yeah, again, you'd feel like they might give you a bit more range than some of the other weapons, keep them at bay in the corridors, but they just don't do enough damage unless you've got a super OP upgraded one. When it comes to the other creatures, we should know now that the Stag Breaker is going to be the best way to deal with the bats, or any kind of hammer, or possibly an Atka again, so you don't be carrying too many items and tools or weapons with you, then I would say yeah, an Atka could be really good. You do quite a bit of wide damage against the bats. It might take a couple more swings, but you are definitely doing a big AoE effect on them. The bats can surprisingly take you down, especially when you do get big swarms. At very first when I started playing, I only had maybe 3 or 5 attacking me, but there have been occasions now where I've had like 7 or 8, maybe even more. The Ulvers aren't too bad either. They generally can be taken out with whatever you've got to hand. Like, as long as you get a bit of an upper hand on them running while they're still getting up, you've got plenty of time to take them down. They have the same weaknesses also as you would expect as the Cultists, so poison, silver, spirit basically. And they are resistant to fire, only taking a tiny little amount. I believe the Cultists are much more immune to fire, like they won't take any damage from fire. And there you go, I hope that's been a little bit useful. If you haven't still seen or looked up how to defeat them, or you're having trouble actually getting through, this should hopefully give you a few tips. Until next time, I'll catch you later.